What's up, guys? This is Jakob. I'm content AI manager and helping entrepreneurs around the world with their content strategy, creating content with AI tools. Welcome to a new episode of the Content AI live show. I'm the host of the show. My name is Jakob, and I'm really thrilled to speak with a real AI expert, James Ong. He's the founder of the Artificial Intelligence International Institute and also co-chair of RIMAS, which is also an organization which mentions the importance of being aware of risks of AI, which is a topic that not everybody is discussing, but we're very thrilled to have somebody with that much knowledge. I mean, he's an international expert. Welcome, James, to the AI live show.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Glad to be here.
Yes.
Fascinating, especially content created with AI.
Yeah, so that's my niche, and yeah, but your knowledge is much broader when it comes to AI. I have a little niche, content AI, but your knowledge is much bigger. So that's the reason why
Oh
you're
yes,
on the show.
you're so humble. I actually learned a lot from talking to you as well. Yeah, you're really at the
Yeah,
forefront of using AI. That's the part that I like the most. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. I'm really thrilled that you're on the show. Maybe for people who don't know you, can you introduce yourself in a nutshell? So, who are you? Because you also have a very international background. That's, I think, very important to understand. Can you introduce yourself in a few sentences?
Yeah, actually, I'm actually born in Malaysia and then spent some time in Singapore. And then I spent about 20 years in the US, in Austin, Texas, the booming high tech city right now.
Yes.
So my background in AI is that I started in 1986 in a research lab called MCC and did a lot of research in AI in the fifth generation computer project. Then I spent many years in the research lab. Then after that, I joined a Stanford spin-off startup, also on AI in the 90s, and then did a lot of major AI deployment for many of the major company in the US, in Europe as well. Then the last 20 years, I'm back to Asia and spending some time doing mobile internet, fintech as well. And the last 10 years, because of the end of the AI winter, I start to come back to the AI arena again. I'm so fortunate to be back. So glad,
Yeah.
very grateful. Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a nutshell. So very international, and you're based in Singapore, which is also a high tech city, and it has also very interesting startup scene, and very very hungry in my opinion. I had some work with them, and yeah, for all people, can you, because you already mentioned this AI winter, maybe we can start with that one. That's what is this AI winter, and why is it important to know about AI winter? Why is this important?
I see. Okay. Well, about AI is that a lot of people, some people know, but most people doesn't know, especially for the younger generation. Actually, AI has a very long history since the 50s, and the 60s. So there's a wave of AI research that was very vibrant in those days. Then around the 80s and the 90s, there was a fifth generation computer project to drive based on AI technology, based on something what we call the knowledge based AI. And that era actually was there was a lot of money involved in the R&D as well as commercialization. So the lesson learned in those 80s and 90s is that the hype was so high to a point where people were making promises about AI that was not beyond is actually the scope. And at the same time, the computational power, right, in terms of computer wasn't that strong yet. But indeed, there was a lot of things done during the era. And because there's so much hype was going on and so much money going into the industry, so I think it went into the AI winter, a little bit like the crypto winter today. But at the
Mhm.
time, most people who are involved in AI are mainly in the United States, a little bit in Europe and Israel, and a little bit in Japan. Yeah. So that is about the AI winter. Yeah. About
Yeah.
mid 90s until early 2015 or something like that, when AlphaGo start to become well known with the case in terms of the AlphaGo applications. Yeah.
Yeah. So in order to, I mean, there are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to AI and this hype and this over emphasizing what AI can do actually. I think if people don't try it and don't understand it, they're afraid and they don't understand it or don't want to use it. I think that are the reasons mainly why people say, well, I'm not interested in AI, and which leads to an AI winter. And I spoke with this also with Andy, who's also on Remas, and he also thought, well, if people don't understand it, they are afraid of things, and then this AI winter can happen again, and that's the reason why we're here and speaking about this topic, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Definitely need to have a better understanding of AI. I do not know everything about AI, but in the sense that I do have the being in the fortunate or unfortunate position of going through AI for the last 36 years and have the fortunate or the unfortunate situation of going through AI winter, right? But I think
Yeah.
you are right. I think having better knowledge about it will allow you to have a better understanding of the opportunities and the risks
Hmm.
to embrace AI. And it's for sure in the sense that I think you cannot avoid the arrival of AI as a technology. It's really permeating into our society and affecting everything that we do in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So can we go back? So what was your first memory when it comes to AI? Was it a game? Was it a movie? Was it a what was it? Was it a book that the first time
Oh,
that you are confronted with AI?
first time I learned about AI is when I took my undergraduate course in AI in 1985 by a professor called Elaine Rich. She wrote one of the earliest textbooks in AI. In fact, it's actually on my bookshelf, actually.
Ah,
So
okay.
there's a book there, and that was one of the early textbook. And I think I was fascinated when I took a course like that about what AI can do with all the all kind of algorithm that can make it happen. And how do you use AI for gaming and etc. How do you play chess game, for example? So I
Yeah.
think it was fascinating, and I think it's actually very exciting. The first time I get involved in it, it was 1985, so that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And that was the moment where you thought, okay, I have to do more studies and I have to be involved in this AI topic. What was that? Was
Oh,
that the
actually, definitely, I was very interested because
yeah.
when we was doing computer science, so we cover many topics, right, from compiler to databases and AI. They're all interrelated. What happened is that when I finished my undergraduates, I got into my master degree, right? So I got a job, and I didn't know that I got a job at a research lab that's focusing on AI research.
Ah,
And
okay.
so my boss are from Italy and from Israel, so they are my mentors, and they really helped me to understand why you have to be doing AI, and in fact, we were doing AI and database together. So that was in the mid 80s. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. So you're in the field of sustainable AI. So I'm not very aware of this topic. So um, why combining these topics, sustainability and AI? So I never. I mean I'm more, like I said, more in the content AI niche, but I found this very interesting. Well, is it like, so my understanding was when I heard this the first time, okay, when I use AI, I'm helping to create a more sustainable future, or what is the main focus of sustainable AI?
Yakub, you asked a very good question. In fact,
Yeah.
it's not sustainable AI is not a field. It's just a term that I kind of coined, in a sense, right? And I know
Okay.
that there are probably a few other people also calling it that way. So I settled on this term called sustainable AI because I set up an institute called AIII, right? Artificial Intelligence International Institute,
Mhm.
and because I was pondering upon being involved in the last AI in the 80s and 90s, then was going through a 20 years winter time.
Yeah.
Then when AI first make a comeback in the deep learning and machine learning, I was fascinated, and I saw the AlphaGo, and I was thinking, right, oh, this is good that AI is making a comeback, which is very rare in the technology field, right? Then I was looking at how people are adopting AI, even with machine learning and deep learning, and I reflect back on my lesson learned in the 80s and 90s. So I saw some of the behavior coming back the same. the investors are coming in. There's so much hype. They are not looking into the actual value being delivered, and every startup start to call themselves AI, and
Yeah.
they also mix up between machine learning, deep learning, and AI, because machine learning and deep learning are indeed a branch of AI, but it doesn't represent the entire or the theoretical foundation of AI. So I was thinking, maybe I need to do something, given my experience, to make sure AI is sustainable. So a lot of people misunderstood the term sustainable AI by saying that, oh, AI and sustainability, where the definition of sustainability is about climate change and environment.
Yeah.
That's indeed one part of the impact we need to look at. But I'm more looking at, first of all, AI itself needs to be sustainable. So at the same, in the literal sense, right? At the same time, AI should be used for sustainability in terms of solving environment, climate change, society problem, social problem, as well as whatever we are facing in the governance area. So in summary, sustainable AI, in the more complete terms, I call it sustainable AI for humanity, right?
Mhm.
Sustainable for humanity, where we need to make sure AI is sustainable. At the same time, AI can be used for sustainable development as well. And yeah, there are more detail about sustainable AI for humanity. If you want to, I can share more later on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So to some degree, more like so that AI is more within the society and people are using it and also understanding it in that sense sustainable. Okay, I think I got it now. Yeah.
Maybe I can help clarify a little bit, Yakub.
Yeah.
I think when I look at AI, right, how to make sure that it's sustainable is actually in four different ways. Okay,
Okay.
four ways. Okay, number one, we need to make sure AI is sustainable in terms of technology. What we have is what I call the second generation AI, which is a data driven AI, which is what people are talking about using deep learning or machine learning. But in the first generation AI in the 80s and 90s, when we applied for industry application, this is called more of the knowledge based AI, using human
Mhm.
knowledge to drive the AI. And I think machine learning and deep learning or data-driven AI are very powerful, but at the same time, it could be limited. It also has its own set of challenges, especially sustainability. It may use a lot of data, it consume a lot of energy, and etc. With all the large language model that's happening today, so there are pros and cons to that. At the same time, data-driven AI like machine learning and deep learning also suffer from some problem, what I call explainability problem. It's a black box. So a lot of times you use AI, you do not know why is it functioning that way, right? So I think technologically, we need to do something more. So I think some of the well-known scientists like the Turing Award winner like LeCun or Gary Marcus, or IBM itself with the neural symbolic, they're all looking into different way of developing AI from the current version to the future version. So that is the technology, sustainable AI in terms of technology. The next thing is how to make sure AI is commercially sustainable. How do you make sure when you build an AI solution is actually commercially viable, so that the cost basis and etc. are manageable? And that one has a lot to do with the machine learning ops, the AI ops, and etc. Yeah. Then the other third aspect of the sustainable AI is about how do you make sure the AI can contribute to sustainability and sustainable development. So I would normally look at that as maybe we can align with the United Nations SDG. That way you can align about you making sure you're using it for good rather than using for things that we do not need or to hurt people, right? So that is an
Yes.
alignment of the value. And last but not least, the last aspect of the sustainable AI is about governance. I think given the ethical issues and the biases issue deriving from data-driven AI, I think we need to do a lot more work on the governance side, especially a new form of AI that actually help you to govern AI itself. Uh,
Mhm.
so that is another a new technology need to be developed to ensure we have the right tool to govern the risk. You mentioned about risk from remarks, right? To govern the risk created by AI itself. Yeah. Also the risk of using AI. I hope
Yeah.
it's clear. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thanks for the clarification. So a lot of interesting points. So maybe the last one that you mentioned. So because I discussed this also with Andit. So the AI governance, how to make sure. I mean, there are already legal complications, like when a company is creating an AI and then you get lawsuit. Who's in charge of it? The CEO or the people who the developer of the AI? So who will be suited and is responsible for this? Or an AI is, especially in the HR, there are a lot of struggle when the AI is choosing specific people and some people not are included. Is this a form of is this is a bias problem of the AI and these kind of things? So I think that the governance part is one of the biggest issues. Or how do you see it? Because there's nothing there's so less legal issues, so legal bills that are passed by governments. So I think this will increase in the coming. I hope this will increase. But what do you think? So the governance part.
Okay, for sure, in terms of AI governance, is definitely increasing in importance, and in fact, it should become higher priority, in my personal opinion. Right, as you know, technology are always ahead of the policy and regulation. Right, as in any new
Yeah.
technology, and in the sense that it's the same situation with AI. Uh, but AI, in my opinion, is a more complex and unique frontier technology for the reason because it's a technology that may be created and designed for us with a certain purpose, but may get out of control. That means it's beyond our control at some point because the fundamental principle of AI is that it's learning, it's self-learning, it's also
Yes.
self-modifying. When anything is self-modifying, at some point it may self-modify to be not within our control. So I think when you talk about AI governance, there are multiple aspects to it. The first aspect is that you need to put in the policy or the processes or the operation and the legal framework to ensure people design and create and use AI the right way, right? So that's one way of doing it, but it's still very manual, right? So you ask the question, who is responsible, right? I think to define who is responsible, the industry in terms of best practice needs to catch up, and you need to define standard. When you define standard, then you can set policy and regulation to decide. If I set a certain standard, you need to comply, right? If you don't comply, then you may be responsible. Now, it could be the CEO that is not doing the right job based on the standard. It could be the operation person. It could be the scientist, right? So there are many aspects to it. But this one type of governance is very traditional in most of the industry today. Everybody are doing that, whether it's about safety in the drive, in the car, in the boat, and on the plane, right? But I think for AI, in the sense that with especially deep learning and machine learning, it's very black box. It's really hard for you to know what is going to behave because when you start learning from the data, you may have a new batch of data coming in, you may change the behavior and the algorithm. When the algorithm performs certain thing that is not even to the awareness of anybody in the human organization, right? Then you become who is responsible, right? So now we also need to develop another type of governance, which is like cybersecurity in respect to the internet. We need to make sure that we develop a safety measure that we need to use to manage the risk of AI, right? So that's why organization like REMAS is supposed to help to define those things. And third area I would say is that beyond that last two things I talked about, that means the human processes. The second part is defining a safeguard, like safety safeguard in terms of thing to manage that. I think with AI being a very dynamic technology that is self-learning and self-evolving and self-modifying, we need a new type of technology, which is I call it a new top form of AI technology that allow you to define governance so that you can use AI to manage the risk of AI itself. So you need to have different type of AI, and you need to be an AI that is human controllable, unreadable, but powerful enough to control AI algorithm that may not be within your control. So you may need to use it as a way as a containment strategy to manage that. Yeah. So that I call it the third category, the computational governance type of framework. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a very challenging task to do. I mean, to what
Yeah.
to some degree, checking. It's like a checks and balances. Sounds a little bit. So, what is the
Yes.
AI doing, and who's in charge of interacting or yeah, checking what decisions are made, and but at the same time also letting the AI do his job. So yeah, it's sounds
You are
like very challenging.
you are spot on. You're spot on. It's actually a meta AI to manage AI.
Yeah,
The AI at the
yeah,
meta level to do so. A little bit like if you look at a stock trading system, right? There's an operational system to do the trading, right? There's a technology to do that. But you may need another system to monitor the system itself, which is a different type of system based on the different type of monitoring capability. And it's a kind of AI risk technology or AI governance technology needs to be developed. I believe it needs to be developed really quickly in the next 5 to 10 years before AI gets out of hand with misused by people, or when they get out of hand because AI has evolved to a point where it become too out of control. Yeah. So those are things that I advocate, especially at AIII. This is what we advocate to make sure that we bring the awareness, also initiate some activities or initiative or collaboration from the best people all over the world, especially out of
yeah.
Singapore, to solve the problem. At least look at the problem and start to think about it, basically.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that this is not a topic only for Singapore or only for Germany. That's a worldwide thing. And if you speak with people around the world, I mean, I know people in Europe, in the US, in Asia. It's a global topic because this is something. I mean, the AI will not stop in Singapore when they are over the border. That's an international topic, in my
It's a
opinion.
global problem. You're right. In
Yeah,
fact, it's a problem that is going to affect our future or our children's future. It's,
yeah,
I think the AI problem is as important as the climate change problem, uh, in my personal opinion. Yeah, because one is visible, one is invisible. The problem with AI you can't see. It's like
yeah.
you're running some algorithm in the social media. It's affecting all our brain and our behavior. We don't even know what's happening, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest fear that you. I mean, if you don't know that there's a fear or something to be fearful of, then yeah, that's the biggest problem. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, having built lots of AI system before and very complex system, I know how powerful and beneficial as well as how dangerous it can become
Yeah.
if we don't do something about it. Yes.
Yeah. Can you? I mean, maybe this is a question too far, but can you speak also about these dangers that you felt, or some of these experiences where you can give use cases, if it's okay, if you can mention it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. No issue. I would say maybe even in for commercial system, right? If you're using it to manage commercial system, uh, as you know, in algorithm that you run, if it's not done right, can have a lot of implication now. It could create financial losses. It could create a business operation problem, right? But these are still basic, you can suffer from losses. If you have algorithm that actually affect people's life in terms of selection of candidates and those kind of thing, right? You may not even realize you have done something wrong, and you may find out that you affect people maybe 20 years down the road, right? So those are another type of risk, right? Then if you look at what happened to the social media in the last 15 years with all the algorithm running with the mobile phone, it's really affect us mentally in our society in terms of our divide, right? Again, people, I mean, including myself, I wasn't even aware of that, right? We've become addicted to the phone, right? And the AI algorithm is getting smarter every day. You know what you want, right? So I think those are dangerous things.
Yeah.
Then you also look at the deep fake stuff. you can see a lot of things are happening. You can use it for lots of creativity. You can also use it to fool lots of people, and in fact, you can disappoint lots of people as well. For me, there are more existential threat that I'm actually quite concerned about. For example, we built really big AI system. At some point, nobody know what's happening, right? Because it's so complex. Now, if such a system are used for transportation across the world, that could be dangerous. If you use it for weapon that you run lots of drone, thousands or hundreds of them as weapon, that is very very dangerous. You may be subject to error or safety problem, right? Of course, the more so-called advanced problem would be the AGI, artificial general intelligence, where we hit the super intelligence stage. At some point, AI may just wake up in the middle of the night and start to be conscious of themselves. I'm not saying it's possible, or I do not know, but I do feel that it's something important for us to start thinking about, to make sure we do put some safeguard and understand how AI will evolve, and also put the safeguard to make sure we protect ourselves. And so these are things that we need to address, as well as not being abused by the wrong people. Don't want to fall into the wrong hands as well.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of risk, right? There are
yeah,
all
yeah,
kinds.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So one thing that, especially in my content niche, is so deep fake. So the danger of producing videos that are not actually from me, so that I say something. There's this famous deep fake video of Obama where he says Donald Trump is basically, I think, idiot or something. So something bad about another person, and this was on YouTube, but it was actually, I mean, it was clearly a deep fake video. But if somebody says has some video material of me where I just look into the camera, another person can produce deep fake videos about me saying something that I never said before. So this is something that can can really happen in the future, because there's already the software out there. And yeah, this is just one example, and you mentioned many. So when it comes to you mentioned safety guard a couple of times. So in order to save us, so the obvious thing is creating some standards how to use AI. Is that right? And how? Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think creating standard is needed, because that means a standard is a type of collaboration between industry, government, or the stakeholder, right? And it takes a while to come up with standard. And when you have standard, it means that you can learn from each other. And because not everybody knows everything, right? At the same time, you both agree, or the group of people agree, with our collective knowledge and intelligence to define something that will protect ourselves. Uh, but typically, standard may not cover all the detail, so it's a necessary part of it. But ultimately, you still need policies and regulation, and you also need technology too to help you to enforce against human, and also to enforce against system. It's the system I'm more concerned about, because human can always do good and do bad, right? You can control and regulate and make sure they are compliant through other mechanism. But when you're building system that is so complex, you may not know what's going to happen to it, especially for, again, self-learning, self-modifying system, and
Yeah.
self-upgrading in a sense. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, what were steps into building a standard? So doing conferences where policymakers and lawmakers and entrepreneurs are coming together and speaking about these standards, or how would be, in your opinion, an approach? Or is there an approach? Maybe there's no
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
but
yeah. There
yeah,
are first of all, they are internationally there are standard on that define standard bodies like ISO, right? So I'm involved in some of them in different country, and typically the standard will put together different stakeholder industry player to come and contribute. At the same time, I mean, you have association, right? Like REMAS, right? Many other association like Triple AI, Association for the Advancement of AI, right? And so these are organizations that actually can also play a role with all the members to define certain standard. Obviously, the standard is just part of the doing the work through workshop and dialogue and writing up things, right? But ultimately, it's the putting together people from across the world to come to conferences, to discuss and build trust, and also spend time communicating and debating, right? What's the right way of going about doing it? Because every country, as you know, have different needs, right? And they address different set of problems, and we all have
Yeah.
different language, cultural background as well. So this kind of event, this particular interview you're doing is actually helpful, right? You're actually facilitating some of the communication and sharing as well.
Yeah. Yes. Indeed. So you mentioned several times the institute. Can you maybe describe how the you said triple AI, right?
A
Can
triple
you
I.
A triple I? Can you
Yeah.
describe so how the institute is creating or sharing knowledge in which ways, and what or start with the aim? What's the aim of the institute?
Okay, our institute was set up in 2017. It was started with an informal setting, right? With a group of people discussing, communicating. So our focus is on advocating sustainable AI for humanity, based on the four area I talk about, right? Technologically
Yes.
sustainable, commercially sustainable, impact-wise sustainable, as well as governance-wise sustainable, right? So what we do is share. First of all, come up with our own original thinking and start to share based on my experience, as well as a list of scientists that I work with across different country and different culture. Then once we do that, then we start to work with a major platform and event and ecosystem in Singapore, in China, in ASEAN, right? As well as some of the conferences. I will also give talk from India and Middle East as well. Yeah. So I think that's one part of it. Second of it, with our thought leadership, we also mentor and accelerate some startup through another organization that we have, and that will actually impart the right values and the strategy for the startup who want to embrace AI as a technology, especially many AI company who just plug in the name AI and they use machine learning and deep learning. Sometimes they
Mhm.
do not know the risks or the limitation and the cost of actually pursuing AI solution. So there's an area we can guide them so that they have a longer term future, so that they embrace sustainable AI, not just AI, for their own sustainable development of the startup, basically. And of course, we work with a big company, we work with a big unicorn as well. So where we share different types of thoughts and also advocate through our ecosystem.
Awesome. Just writing that down. That's super important in my opinion. Just I mean, all the work with Remas and the talks with Andit, super valuable because it's just me as an entrepreneur. I think wow, I can help me with the content production. Awesome, I can save time. I never until I met Andit and Remas, I never thought about the risks. What risks? I mean, it's good to know them to some degree. I mean, it's not like that I'm changing everything that I'm doing, but being aware of them already
Yes.
helps me. Yeah.
In fact, you are using what I call generative AI, right? A type of creative AI, so you can use it to create content, right? And in the sense, you are using it the right way. In my definition of AI for good, right? You're doing
Hmm.
AI for good because
Yes.
AI is helping you to create a more business opportunity for yourself as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
It's actually for you to create more ideas for you and reduce your workload so that you can be more efficient. And
Yes.
many people whom you help to write content with will also benefit from the service that you have, right? So that is for
Yes.
good. But of course, one of these days, somebody can hire you to go and do bad, right? For example, right? Then that's where you need to decide: do you want to use your AI for good or AI for bad, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, this kind of setting with this discussion will make sure that, oh, you will not do that. And when this is where your judgment call come in. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think so. I thought. I mean, when you explained this, I thought of Spider-Man. It's always a decision. So you can with technology in general. So it's like it's not technology. It's not bad or good. It's human. It's human decision that is bad or good. I mean, technology is neutral. It can be used for good and bad. I mean, it's nuclear weapons, nuclear power can be used for good things. Well, this is a big discussion, but
Yeah,
you get the point. So
yes.
it's both sides of a coin, and the same with AI. Yeah. Okay.
I like to add to your point just now. You mentioned about Spider-Man. I always use this statement, right? In Spider-Man movie, you have this thing called "with great power come with great responsibility," right?
Exactly.
We have a powerful technology AI. You definitely need to make sure you have great responsibility. Now, I also want to add one more thing to the point you just made. You see, technology is neutral, right? Okay, and it's up to the human to define how it's being used. I totally
Yes.
agree. But I do want to point out something very specific to the audience, right? AI is a different type of technology because AI is about, in the sense, replicating human intelligence. And our goal, our design goal is to make sure we can create a machine who think like us. Maybe at some point you may think beyond us, right? Now, there could be a so-called inflection point where AI may just so-called maybe doing things on its own without our control. You see what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to? I'm
Yeah.
not saying
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
know when is it going to happen. So it's different from, let's say, blockchain technology or in mobile internet technology. Those are technology we invented. We see how we want to use it, right? But AI is something we create something so that it starts to think on its own, and therefore we need to do more than the usual things to do AI for good. We need to make
Yeah.
sure that not just we do AI for good, we need to make sure we do AI to make sure the machine is actually doing good on its own. And that is a tough problem to solve.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, yes, yes, you. So I will think about that one. Yes.
Yes,
So
please think about it. We can always talk more in the next interview if you
yeah,
want.
yes. So when it comes to, I mean, I could speak 1 more hour with you, but we are limited on the time. But when it comes to the future, what wishes do you have when it comes to AI? So, or what do you see? What do you wish for the midterm, long term, when it comes to AI on a global perspective?
Well, I think in terms of direction and goal, I would say we try to use AI for good towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. It's not that I believe in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, but it's because it took human to agree on something with $7 billion represented by United Nations. That's the closest institution that we have, right? If United Nations have worked so hard to establish 17 goal that we all agree, right, more or less, and then at least there is a good framework to aim towards. So whenever you do a startup or you create AI or design AI solution, right, start to think about what are the 17 one of the 17 goal you can align to, right? I think that is the first thing you want to do, right? And at the same time, back to the sustainable AI for humanity, right? If you are a participant in the AI creation and design, always remember the lesson that has gone through in the 80s and the 90s. Listen and see what went wrong. And there's actually a lot of research on that one. And I do read up a lot. And there's a report that I've read done by an MIT student. I talk about what went wrong. I think there's a lot of things to learn about to make sure that in this round of AI, we do something better than what we have done in the 80s and 90s. And we learn from history, and doesn't mean that it's exactly the same, but there are things that we could learn from and make sure we do it right. And I think make on the commercial side, make sure you create value. And that sounds easily said than done because there's so much uh, venture money going into the industry, and they are forcing the startup to scale too early, right? Before they can solve the problem, right? And burning money to blitz scaling is not necessarily the right way of doing it. So that's why I hope to see that we learn from there and make sure that we design or incubate the startup in the right way, right? And solving the right problem. And by the way, one more thing I like to say is for the
Yeah.
future is that for AI, make sure we look into the AI governance problem and AI
Yeah.
governance, and especially technology for governance of AI itself. And that is something unique to the AI because that has so much implication for our society, yeah, in the future.
Yeah, big topics, and they will not. I mean, the solutions will not come overnight. So it will be incremental. It will be one step back and one step forward, and it will take a little bit of time because it will be new. It will be something new. Yeah.
Yes, we need to bring, first of all, right now we have this conversation, hope to bring awareness to the right decision maker. At the same time, we need to invest a lot more money in terms of basic science and research on some of the problems I talk about. And you need to go back to the science, and then you need to look into the commercialization with the right level of capital expenditure, right? And then also build up the ecosystem to define the standard that you talk about towards impact, right? Yeah. So roughly that is the big pictures. Yeah.
Awesome, love it, really
Wow.
cool.
Thank you so much. Enjoy
Yeah.
the
When
conversation.
when people want to know more about you or the institute, where should they go?
Number one, go to LinkedIn, follow, connect, and follow me. Second, we also have our the page, company page for AIII, Artificial Intelligence International Institute. Just follow us. And third, we also are involved in quite a number of ecosystem events like World AI Conference, WAIC. You can follow that as well. As well as in Singapore, we have a major tech event called the Switch. It stands for Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology. And again, follow that. We are involved in many of the activity there and sharing many of the thought leadership, including bringing many stakeholders from the ecosystem to come to get involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Switch was the name, the last one that you mentioned.
Switch, SWITCH. Yeah. SWI is the switching, right? But it stands for Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology. It's definitely one of the technology event that I strongly support because it's a very global event funded by Singapore government to build a tech ecosystem across the world. I think it's about 45 country and 6 continent or something like that. So it's pretty well, and we welcome all your audience from Germany, Europe, anywhere in the world. Come to Singapore and have fun here, and enjoy being a startup here as well. Yeah,
And enjoy the food in Singapore, which I tasted once. I was there once.
of course we have good food and we have good
Yes.
people also. We welcome
Yeah, passionate people. Awesome, James. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope this will be the starting point for other discussions, because I think this will be something more and more important in the coming years. And yeah, I'm ready and here to be again with you another time. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Definitely love to. Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation. And again, this is the beginning. And we'll need a lot more of your expertise and talent to help get the words out to the community, right? And also, we should one of these days talk about the industry you're in, about this whole AI to generate content, right? Yeah. The technology is going to evolve every day now, and your
Yes.
life may change on a constant basis, right?
Yes. Yes.
How
Definitely.
exciting it is, right?
Yeah, it is really. I mean, that's the reason why I'm in this niche. So anyway, thank you again, and hopefully see you on the next episode. For all watchers who watch this, if you have any questions, just let me know in the comment section, and I will forward to James. Okay, see you next time. Thank you. And
Thank
bye-bye.
you. And thank you everybody for watching.